Pikë përkrahet nga Prishtina Ticket.
Mirëmbrëma. Sonte në Pikë një mysafir nga Gjermania, Mikhail Roth, ministër i Evropës nga viti 2013 deri në vitin 2021 dhe pastaj nga viti 2021-2025 në krye të Komisionit Parlamentar për Politikë të Jashtme të Bundestagut Gjerman. Mikhail, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Veton.
It's really a pleasure, and you were in a very interesting period of time, in a transitional period of time, we will call it now, from 2026 onwards, in which you were both a minister for Europe and then afterwards as chair of the Foreign Policy Committee of the Bundestag. Europe at that time has gone in a position of having 2 points of pressure, if we want to simplify it. One is the end of a unilateral world and the transition towards President Trump. And the other is the Russian invasion in Ukraine. For different reasons and from different points, starting points, we have President Trump and President Putin exerting pressure on the definition of Europe, on the identity of Europe.
Yeah, you're completely right. Europe is under attack domestically, but also from outside. The rise of nationalism, populism, is a big threat for all of us. You cannot compare a democratically elected president of the United States with a dictator in Russia, but both are not really happy with Europe. They are not committed to our European values. And this is a big problem, not just for Kosovo, but also for Germany, for all of us in the European Union, in Europe. Trump's message is very clear. I don't care European security. It's your backyard. It's your interests. Do it on your own. So, and this is a really, 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 really huge challenge for us.
Although, may I interrupt you?
Of course.
This is not a new message. Since Obama and Biden, we've been receiving the same message in Europe throughout the 21st century.
Yeah, completely right. I can't agree more. But Europe's political leaders were too naive, and they didn't understand that the United States is much more interested in the Indo-Pacific area, in the relationship with China, because China is the biggest challenge for the United States, but also for us on the international political agenda. And it was so comfortable for us in Germany, in Europe. We could spend our money for many things, welfare state, education, etc. But
which was good.
It was excellent. Yeah. But we always expected that the United States, the big brother on the other side of the Atlantic, take care of our security and defense. And this time is over. And this is a very, 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 very painful lesson. In my opinion, Germany understood it rationally, but we didn't understand it emotionally, what it really means for us, for our budget, what it really means for our role in the European Union, because we cannot just talk about the single market and about the completion of the single market. We have to talk about defense, about defensiveness, about awareness, about resilience. And if we talk about this, that brings me very, very quickly to Russia, because Russia is the biggest threat for our security. And we didn't find a smart and comprehensive approach in order to defend ourselves and to be more independent from United States security.
Let me be a devil's advocate. Why is Russia the biggest threat to Europe if it could not win in Ukraine?
It's very simple. We forgot to listen to dictators very carefully, because the message from Mr. Putin was always crystal clear. It's not just an attack on a sovereign country in his neighborhood, it's also an attack on our values. He is extremely threatened by freedom, human rights, liberal democracy, strong parliaments. And that's why he won't stop. I know not just the Ukrainians, but also many of my citizens, Germans, others, maybe also the people here in Kosovo, are tired by this war. But at the end, if we don't support the Ukraine, we also will lose this battle, because I'm sure the appetite of Mr. Putin is so huge that he won't stop in Kiev. He will continue. Moldova, Baltic republics, Georgia, more maybe.
I mean, he can do more of the same, which is basically not allow for the construction of a stable Europe throughout the region, Western Balkans, Moldova, Georgia, etc. But let me introduce a third concept, not only what is happening in the U.S. and Russia, but we have gone through, in Habermas's words, through a structural transformation of the public sphere in the 21st century, which is being used by both the demagogues in the US or in Russia or in Europe. How can we deal with democracies while there is an unregulated public sphere in terms of social media?
Our problem is that we don't have the tools to regulate the social medias, because it's a global challenge, it's a global topic, and our instruments, our tools, we just can use in Europe, in the European Union. And it was much too late. We never ever established a proactive strategy in order to protect individual rights, to make digitalization to a success story, not for the few, but for the many. We failed. And now we have to pay a very high price, because the billionaires in the United States, they sit in the driver's seat. They control it. And our tools, again, are extremely limited. But we shouldn't give up. At the end, I'm still fascinated by digitalization. I'm still fascinated by artificial intelligence. It's not just a threat; it's also a huge opportunity also for democracies. But democracies, in the understanding of many ordinary people, democracy is too slow, too bureaucratic, too technocratic, and that's why guys like Trump and other populists are so popular, because they deal with their own rules because they don't have rules, and they don't respect the Constitution, they don't respect the law, and that makes them so attractive for people who are just stressed, who are just nervous, who are just worried about the global situation, which is dominated by wars, crises, and conflicts.
Which then puts Putin also in a driver's seat, because he has these troll farms in St. Petersburg, and then he dictates part of the political debate in our societies. Our societies are not, our public sphere is not influenced only by our own thinking, but also by induced thinking from St. Petersburg.
Oh, of course. We are obliged to defend freedom and individual freedom, and also the freedom of the sphere of digitalization and the social media activities. But on the other hand, we are also obliged to protect ourselves from these trolls, because it's very painful for the Germans, and I know I had to explain it in Germany and not just in Kosovo. But we are already involved in this war. It's a disinformation campaign. We are involved in smear campaigns, not just against individuals but also against our democracy. And this propaganda toxicates also the public discussions in Germany. Too many Germans do believe that more or less Mr. Putin is right.
And the earth is flat.
Pardon?
And that the earth is flat, which is...
And the earth is flat, yeah. This is another thing which is hard for me with my academic background, with my background as a progressive politician, which is very hard for me to understand, that we have to discuss about things I never intended to discuss, about facts and figures. But there are a growing number of people who don't believe politicians, who don't believe journalists, who don't believe into facts and figures, and that makes the public discussion, and you mentioned Habermas, so difficult.
So if we recapitulate, we are in moments of reshaping, not only of the world, but then of the identity of Europe, suddenly waking up and finding that Europe has to defend itself. It not only has to defend itself conceptually, but practically, because it is in a war in Ukraine with Russia. It is redefining itself in a public sphere that is structurally changed, and we don't know how it will be reshaped. And then Germany has introduced a new word to Europe, which was Zeitenwende. Now, it's a great word, but is there a discrepancy between saying Zeitenwende and measures to address the Zeitenwende?
Mm-hmm. The former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz delivered a historical speech when he mentioned the watershed moment, Zeitenwende, for the very first time. But too many politicians and too many fellow citizens in my own country believe this is just a short run. The implementation of Zeitenwende is a long and bumpy road. It's a marathon.
And what are the three things that you think have been understood or are being implemented in the Zeitenwende moment?
So it means more responsibility for Europeans, because we cannot always count on the United States if it comes to defense and resilience.
Is there a European defense?
No, that is the tragedy of life. Second, we have to spend much more money. And third, we have to change our mindset. We were too lazy if it comes to our values, because we were thinking sooner or later the whole world will be a sphere of democracy, liberal democracy,
That's
freedom, and human
Fukuyama,
rights.
end of history.
Yeah. And that was extremely naive, because at the end there are other political systems, authoritarian systems. They're attractive to many people. They offer peace, they offer order, they offer security, they offer also prosperity, but they don't care democracy, they don't care freedom. And for many people who have to face serious problems, freedom is far away. Freedom is not a concrete desire. This is more an abstract thing for the good times, but not for challenging times.
Yeah, as the Chinese would say, you can't eat freedom, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Like Bertolt Brecht. Yeah.
And so we understand what needs to be done, but how can that be done?
With leadership.
But structurally, what needs to be changing? I mean, if we had the most illuminated leader in Europe today, what would he do?
First of all, to be always frank and honest with the people. That this new time, the Zeitenwende, changes everything. But for good sake, it's a long and bumpy road, but it's worth it, because at the end, it protects and strengthens our European way of life. So we have to change our mindset. We have to understand that just unity in Europe will make us more resilient, more capable. We have to overcome this very stupid national selfishness. We have to think, for the Germans, it's extremely important to listen more carefully to states closer to the front line, like the Baltic countries, like Poland, like others. We have to learn from Ukraine what resilience, what deterrence in times of war really means. And we have to create a Europe which is capable, which is able and also willing to defend itself.
And that means a European Union with its own army?
In the long run, yes. I was dreaming always of a Europe without armies. But it was naive, because I always had to take into account that this is just a smart solution without dictators, without a new era of aggression and wars. So, but in times when dictatorships like China are getting more and more aggressive domestically and outside, and in times where Putin wants to destroy our values and attacks his neighbors, we cannot talk about Europe without army. But in the long run, we have to come closer together. And we were always proud about the Franco-German relationship. But if it comes to defense, if it comes to the security, it's so difficult to agree on these key issues, to strengthen our cooperation of our defense industry, for instance, to start a joint production of tanks and other extremely important instruments, drones, etc. So we are not really in a good shape.
No, that means when you say long run, let's say 20 years. So European Union will not have an army in the 20 years. But you cannot have a vacuum in security. What are you going to do in the meantime?
This is the problem for a committed European like myself, because I always were convinced that European solutions are the best one. But in times when countries like Hungary, countries like Slovakia and others block the vast majority, because the guiding principle in foreign and security policy is anonymity, then we have to strengthen the capabilities and the visibility of the member states. I'm not really happy with this construction, but you described it in an excellent way. This is not the perfect moment for the European Union. So in these times of transition, we need strong, reliable nation states, member states who sit in the driver's seats. And that is my expectation. Poland, France, Germany. I'm extremely grateful to the Nordics. They're doing an excellent work, Finland, Sweden, and others. Also, Italy plays a very important role because we cannot expect that at the end, a country like Lithuania or a country like Romania protects our front line if it comes to the Russian aggression.
Yes, but that still does not solve a problem. What are you going to do in a vacuum of 20 years?
In a vacuum, we have to spend much more money in the national armies. We have to learn that cooperation is the best way, also to save money, because it's so inefficient. This is we have a very tough and unfair competition if it comes to military resources, and we have to merge it. And I very much hoped that in a close cooperation between Germany, France, also United Kingdom, which is unfortunately not a member of the European Union, we can motivate other countries to do much more. There's one good thing in Germany. It's not a financial problem because we changed our constitution. So whatever it takes is not just an abstract term for us in Germany. We can deliver, so we can encourage others in the European Union to invest, to spend more money in resilience and defensiveness.
Where would NATO fit in this?
The future of NATO is essential for us, but that means for us we have to strengthen the European pillar of NATO in a close cooperation with Canada, for instance, because I'm more than sure. Also, if Donald Trump is going to leave the White House tomorrow, we won't come back to the good old times. You already mentioned it. Also, the message of Obama was crystal clear, but he was a smart, kind, decent person. He was not such an aggressive, rude political leader with Donald Trump, but his message was very similar to the message of Donald Trump.
Right. So is there a moment for the idea of a single European security space that has Turkey, the UK, the European Union countries, the rest of the countries that are still not in neither NATO nor the European Union forming part of this? Because at the end, there might be a point of respite in the war in Ukraine, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's security in Europe.
It doesn't make sense to waste our time with abstract discussions about a new defense union within the European Union. NATO still exists. From my point of view, it's much easier to strengthen NATO's engagement in Europe. That bears a special responsibility for EU member states, which are also NATO member states, Germany and others. Yeah. But we cannot wait for a strong mindset and a strong and innovative toolbox of the European Union if it comes to defense and security. So NATO remains a very, very important, our most important instrument to strengthen our freedom and our democracy in Europe.
In a strange way, President Trump is helping NATO become a European force.
It was always a European force, but it never worked without the United States. And this is the tragedy. In the midterm, it won't work without. You know, we wasted our time in Europe with disputes and with controversies. At the end, what really counts are not lip service. It was really count were action. And sometimes we forgot to act. So to spend more money, to modernize the defense industry, to strengthen the cooperation, to make us more independent from military supplies from the United States. But honestly, it takes more than 2 or 3 years, and this is the biggest problem for Ukraine, because we all know if Donald Trump really says, "I stop completely the military support of Ukraine," it brings us in a very, 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 very worrying situation. And it's not just about military equipment, it's also about intelligence, the cooperation between the different intelligence services, because the CIA is top and is the benchmark for all of us.
Well, let's assume a positive scenario, even in the best of.
Sorry, I sound sometimes a bit too pessimistic, but usually I'm always an optimist, because without optimism you cannot serve as a politician.
No, that's true. But let's project a positive. The most positive development on Ukraine is the U.S. continues supporting Europe in this fight. Europe, Ukraine find out a modus vivendi somehow with a way to stop the war. But this is not the best scenario. Even the best scenario is not the best scenario if you look at it from the perspective of the Balkans. The Dayton Accords were signed in 1995. It's been 31 years. Kosovo War ended 27 years ago. But we still have a space of unfinished wars and unfinished states in construction. So this is not the best recipe for Ukraine either.
That's true. The European Union is extremely occupied by the war of aggression against Ukraine, but it should also be a wake-up call, because there is a huge lack of strategic interest in the Western Balkans. The situation here in the Western Balkans is for too many people extremely frustrating, because they worked hard for a European perspective, but at the end, political leaders, not just the leaders here in the capitals of the Western Balkans, but also the leaders in Brussels and Berlin and Paris, they didn't deliver. So, and in this political vacuum has been filled by Chinese, Russians, Turkish, and this is a problem for us, because all these regimes don't share our values, and this is the big problem. So I very much hope that we learn from our big mistakes in Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe was for too many leaders a terra incognita. So, or we said, it's part of Europe, but at the end, always Mr. Putin sits in the driver's seat. But these countries are not Russian territory. They are sovereign, independent countries, and they make their own decisions. And if they want to join us, and if they want to share our values, we cannot say, please call the Kremlin and wait for the permission. That was the assessment, and that was the understanding of too many political leaders in Germany and in the European Union. So I very much hope that we invest much more creativity, much more engagement, also money and commitment here in the Western Balkan states, because you already mentioned it. The situation is worrying. Still 5 European states don't recognize the national sovereignty of Kosovo. I don't see any lasting strategy for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dayton delivered peace, but it's not the path towards the European Union. Serbia became an authoritarian country which attacks his neighbors. And I'm not really happy with some authoritarian tendencies here in the region. The worst example from my point of view is North Macedonia. This amazing country changed its state name, with a clear expectation to start accession talks with the European Union because Macedonia was, if it comes to economy, to single market, etc., for a very long time, a role model for others. Then they changed their name, they delivered, they met all the criteria and the conditions of the European Union, and then first the French started to present new conditions, followed by the Bulgarians who present new conditions, and at the end, the pro-European parties failed, and the more nationalistic, more Eurosceptic parties won the elections.
Doesn't it speak of a clash of an internal conflict of concepts, that we've had a Berlin process started and then negotiations for integration into the European Union started for Serbia, and Serbia is more autocratic today and is closer to Russia today than it was when it started the negotiations for integration.
Yeah, right. I fully understand why Angela Merkel, my former chancellor, with others, initiated this Berlin process, because they felt not really comfortable with the situation years ago, because the European perspective was more an abstract thing for people. So she decided, let's talk more about technology, innovation, education, infrastructure. That was good.
Yeah.
But at the end, it was not the light at the end of a very long tunnel the people expected. It's for me, it's crazy that the economic cooperation in the Western Balkan regions is worse if you compare it with the relations between Pristina and maybe Kazakhstan and others. And this is a big failure. It was a big mistake. And the problem with Serbia was always very simple. And we made the same mistake with Mr. Orban. Mr. Orban was for a very long time member of the Conservative Party family. And all the rumors were always the same behind the scenes. Orban is an asshole, but he's our asshole. Mr. Vucic is an asshole, but he's our asshole. No, he's not our asshole. And we forgot to send clear messages to these authoritarian guys. You have to choose the European way of life or the Russian way of life. But this cherry picking, getting money from Brussels and strengthening the ties with the Kremlin doesn't work. Alignment, if it comes to foreign and security policy, is a must. This was a big problem. And yes, if we talk about Kosovo, if we talk about Serbia, I have to talk also about my own mistakes. I was thinking for too long that only substantial progress in the normalization dialogue brings Kosovo closer to the European Union. And that was a mistake, because at the end, the normalization dialogue was never a well-balanced thing, because honestly, for Belgrade, substantial progress in the normalization dialogue is not really important. But it was always very important for Kosovo.
Yeah, it's a good trading card.
So it was very simple for Belgrade, for Mr. Vucic, to block Kosovo. And sorry to say, these authoritarian leaders are quite often smarter than the political leaders of democracies. I met this guy very often. And honestly, when we were sitting at a table like here, the table was more luxurious, I would say, in his chancellery, in his presidential palace. I was always speechless. I was asking my colleagues, what the hell did he tell us? He sounded so smart. Was he really smart, or or is it my problem because I was too naive, or I was not well prepared enough to follow a discussion with him? And I don't want to talk about Mr. Vucic. It's not worth it. But at the end, it illustrates how smart and clever these authoritarian leaders are. Also Mr. Orban and others.
Sure. That's one thing. There's, natural intelligence. Also, many years following the European Union can deliver a daunting message that basically nothing has dramatically changed in the European Union so as to take it more seriously than before. And this is the message that I fear people like Putin understand quite clearly. One of the issues that I discussed many times in Israel, talking to my friends on both the Israeli and the Palestinian side, was how can you take seriously the European Union dealing with Palestine, Israel, if it cannot deal with Kosovo, Serbia?
Of course. Leadership is key. I was never a big fan of Mr. Kohl, Helmut Kohl, the former German Chancellor. But in a historical moment, he said to all his diplomats and bureaucrats, don't bother me with details. Let's talk about the big picture, European and German unification. I know this is a challenge for economy, this is a challenge for other things, but these are details. And that brings me to the Western Balkans. That brings me to Kosovo, Serbia. Oh my God. We should solve this problem, like many other problems. But the whole enlargement process was a process with many, many technocratic details, without any empathy, without any passion, and without a mindset that enlargement is not a generous gift to small countries and the front line. This is in our own interest. Stability, lasting peace, reconciliation, prosperity in the Western Balkans is in Germans, in French interest.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned Kohl, that was a historical transformation in which Kohl, Genscher, that generation of leaders, and with differing opinions with Thatcher and with Mitterrand at the time, but they came to a point of a historical transformation which not only unified Germany, it also unified the rest of Europe closer to Germany and the European Union. If there were a Kohl moment, a Kohl person, not necessarily German, that would lead today, what are three things that he needed to do to unify Europe? The way Kohl said, Germany is going to be united, period. Mm-hmm. We're going to pay for it. We are going to accommodate all the fears of France and the UK and the rest.
If it comes to Europe, a political leader should listen more carefully to the Central and Eastern European countries, because they made their own tragic experiences with Russia, and they know much better what it really means to defend a liberal democracy in times of aggression and war. Secondly,
but practically, what does that mean in the European Union? What does that mean as a suggestion for Brussels?
Forget in the long run our nitty-gritty issues on the national political agenda.
So more federation.
Yes. And
And why do you fear from the word federation?
because I know that this word is extremely toxic, because this is the worst case scenario for nationalists and populists and others. But at the end, this is the only chance for us to survive. Call it United States of Europe, call it federation. At the end, we won't abolish nation states. Kosovo, Germany, France will survive, of course, but they just will survive with a strong and capable European Union. But now it's not the time for theoretical discussions. It's more time for action.
So that means qualified voting. Let's forget.
Yeah.
On all issues.
On all issues, but we in Germany, our friends in France, should also take into account that it means in some issues the other countries will have a majority against Germany, against France. I was wondering why the smaller sized countries in the European Union were extremely skeptical to overcome this anonymity, to end it. Because at the end, it's more a threat for us. Because if a qualified majority in the European Union has been created, it can bring the things forward without Germany or without France. And so this is also a problem for us. But at the end, we have to accept it, because this is the only chance to be more rapid, to be smarter, to be more efficient, to be more innovative.
Would that mean also the possibility of two Europes, of two tire Europes, a Europe that is closer and then the outer side of Europe?
Yeah, but it already exists. Not all European EU member states joined the currency union, are not part of the Euro Club, for instance, or
Schengen.
Or Schengen. Home affairs is a very sensitive issue, for instance, for our Danish friends and others. So it's still, it already exists. And yeah, it's not perfect, but we wasted our time to talk too much about perfect solutions. Neither in families or in everyday's life, nor in politics, we can establish perfect solutions. At the end, it's always the best, the second best option.
One of the problems of these debates is that every time we in the Western Balkans raise the issues of integration, friendly people in Western European countries tell us, wait, we are still resolving our own issues, and until we settle our own issues in the house, we cannot invite you to the house. Is it a feasible excuse, or is it?
This is an excuse, because we were talking about historical moments.
Yeah.
And a window of opportunity is going to close. And I cannot tell the Western Balkan states, for instance, or Ukraine, or Moldova, or Georgia, please sit and wait. Because first of all, we have to solve our domestic problems. We have to change our treaties. We have to change our decision-making processes. Yeah, theoretically, this is the best option. But we cannot wait 2, 3, 4, 5 years more, because, again, if there is a political vacuum, it will be filled by authoritarian regimes. It will be filled by nationalism, populism, by demagogues, and they are the biggest threat for all of us, because they are not committed Europeans. They want to destroy the European idea.
What would happen if you pursue your value system and you say Kosovo has transformed into a democracy? It has problems here and there, but basically it is far higher in democratic values and transparency and functions than Serbia, for example. So why cannot Kosovo get a higher speed of integration than Serbia?
That is here for this country the €1 billion question, and honestly, it was always a very, very unfair discussion, because at the end, my colleagues always told me, Serbia, it's too big to fail, but Kosovo problem is that 5 EU member states don't recognize the national sovereignty. But at the end, it's unfair, because we cannot expect substantial progress regarding rule of law, independence of judiciary, freedom of the press, strong and reliable democratic institutions if we ignore substantial deficits of others, like Serbia. I was very much in favor of a more pragmatic concept, to invite countries before they join the European Union officially to take responsibility, maybe in the Council of Ministers, to join the discussions, to feel and to learn how complicated it is to be a member of the European Union, and also to take responsibility for the decision-making process. At the end, it's not just important to vote officially. At the end, it's more important to sit on the next to the table.
To understand the software.
Here, to understand the software, to understand the mentality, to understand how complicated and complex some political leaders are. Yeah.
And so why is not this happening?
Because of the bureaucracy and the weakness of strategic thinking of too many political leaders. And that is the misunderstanding here, also in the Western Balkans. It's not just important to talk to your friends. It's more important sometimes to talk to your opponents. And unfortunately, for many years, enlargement as the most successful tool to deliver stability, peace, justice, prosperity was not a political consensus. So enlargement doesn't unite the European Union, it divides us. Because for too many leaders, and also for our societies, honestly, that, oh my God, we are facing so many problems domestically. Sorry, but we cannot make the things more complicated with new partners.
Yeah, the AfD argument.
This is not just the AfD argument. This is the argument in many European capitals.
Yeah, but many European capitals will say, we have an AfD problem.
Of course.
Yeah.
We are extremely weak. But we cannot beat nationalists and populists domestically if we ignore our responsibility for the functioning and for the freedom of Europe as a whole. And Western Balkan is not our backyard. The Western Balkans belong to Europe. So it's not a generous gift. It's more a strategic interest for all of us that these countries sooner than later join us.
Countries of the European Union have not participated in any way, shape, or form in the war in Iran or against Iran. Yet the European Union and the world as a whole has felt the tremors from the war, the effects of that war. How does the European Union intend, or how should it intend, to form a policy on this and other issues in which it is not involved?
If it comes to the Middle East, not a single European country sits in the driver's seat. But I was never happy with this message of my chancellor, my government, and other leaders in the European Union. It's not our war. Of course it's our war. We have to pay the bill.
Yeah.
Because the economic, the political consequences are extremely expensive, extremely dangerous. And so it would be better to say, okay, we don't want to be involved militarily, but we would like to take responsibility that this war ends, that lasting peace, security gets a chance in this very fragile, vulnerable region. And the end of the Mullah regime is not just in the interest of the people of Iran or in the interest of Israel, it's also in our interest, because this terror regime pays terrorists not just in Palestine, not just in Yemen, not just in Lebanon or in Iraq. They also pay and support terrorists in Europe.
You spoke of the window of the opportunity, and we started with the Zeitenwende. What happens if we have spent the years from the Zeitenwende pronouncement to the closing of the window of opportunity in debates, but nothing has substantially changed in Europe?
Many things changed. For instance, Germany abolished the excuse, sorry, our financial capacities are extremely limited. We cannot fulfill our commitments if it comes to defense and security. This argument ends.
It's a big psychological threshold. Yeah.
We are in an ongoing reform process. I think too slow, but it works. It takes.
We as who? We as Germany?
The Germans.
Yeah.
I know it's a more difficult question in other leading countries, for instance, France, because the financial capacities of France are extremely limited. And the leadership of Mr. Macron is extremely weak. Or the Spanish Prime Minister, he is extremely popular in my own political family because he is very outspoken if it comes to the White House and Donald Trump, but in the same way he sent a clear message, sorry, we are not ready to fulfill our commitments in NATO.
No.
We are not ready to spend much more money in resilience and defensiveness and deterrence. This is a problem. So at the end, I think a lot remains to be done, but the first step is always the most difficult one. But we don't talk about the first step. We talk about the third, the fourth, the fifth step. And at the very end, I hope that my former colleagues understand that we shouldn't be too bureaucratic. We should be more open-minded and more honest with our people, because they have to understand that this is a very long period of transformation. It's not, I already mentioned it, it's not a short run, it's a long run, it's a marathon.
Michael Roth, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And very good luck with your book. I hope it has a long journey with many languages translated.
Thank you so much, and all the best to you and to my friends here in Kosovo. Thank you.
Faleminderit, natën e mirë.
Pikë përkrahet nga Prishtina Ticket.